It's Super Tuesday, Part 2, and while 6 states are up for grabs in all today, Bernie Sanders seems to be staking his campaign almost entirely on just one of them.
Tuesday is a very, very important day, and Michigan is the most important state. Let's win here in Michigan. Let us win the Democratic nomination. And together, let us defeat Donald Trump.
Sanders did win Michigan in 2016, upsetting Hillary Clinton, who ended up losing the state in the general election as well. But this time around, Joe Biden seems to have the advantage, with somewhere between a 15 and 24-point lead over Sanders, according to 3 new polls in Michigan this week. Nationally, Biden has a 16-point lead. But the battle is on for the support of black voters, who propelled Biden to his game-changing victory in South Carolina a few weeks ago. Over the past few days, both camps have picked up some pretty high-profile endorsements.
So much of what we have seen from Donald Trump and this administration is about trying to suppress people and put them down and beat them down. Joe Biden is the kind of person who lifts people up.
He will lift us up. I bring you the next President of the United States of America. Stand with me for Joe Biden.
I stand with Bernie Sanders today because he stood with me. I stand with him because he's never lost his taste for justice for the people. I stand with him because he stands with you.
So far, Biden has won the overwhelming share of African-American voters. If Sanders doesn't turn that around, will he survive? Joined now by Tony Branch, the Joe Biden supporters, the chair of Brockton's Commission on Diversity, and the former vice president of the Brockton area NAACP. Nice to meet you. Thanks for being here. And State Representative Nika Elugardo is a Bernie Sanders supporter representative. It's great to see you, as always. Black voters are the most reliable voting base, as we know, in the Democratic Party. As I said, overwhelmingly for Biden. The number in South Carolina was roughly 61 to 17 or 18. Why? Why is Biden doing so well with African-American voters?
Quite frankly, African-American voters remember Joe Biden. They remember.
What part of him? Is he vice president for Obama, or is on his own, or what?
Well, I think it's a combination for being Obama's vice president, but also it's a combination of running a campaign of togetherness. I think people have recognized that with respect to other folks that are running for the office, that we are realistic, and realistically speaking, we need to win the White House. Black voters have seen the numbers. They know that Joe Biden's the candidate to do that. He would be the nominee to do that, and we're going to stick with the winner.
Why aren't they with Sanders? Is it? I mean, Barack Obama, who obviously the first black president, used that line, "America's looking for improvement, not revolution." And I think he meant not you or Warren, but him, or at least somebody in the middle of the pack. Why is Sanders doing so poorly with black voters?
Well, you know, I've been in Massachusetts for 30 years, but my first 17 were in Ohio. And so when I talk to my family, I'm the oldest of 7. My family in Ohio, black people in Ohio, they're really concerned that people will react to Sanders. And by people, I mean especially sort of white working class people in Ohio will react negatively to Sanders, much as they reacted negatively to Barack Obama. And they see Joe Biden as someone that can bring calm, someone that can protect black people from backlash.
But Sanders, it seems to me, has a message that should appeal to a wide swath of voters, regardless of color, in terms of particularly his economic message. But that doesn't seem to be connecting as well either, does it?
The message is connecting. The message appeals. So the same people that say that say, I wish America was ready for what Bernie Sanders is trying to do. The reason I'm a strong supporter and endorser of Bernie Sanders is because he sees leadership as an opportunity to help America shift our mindset away from our dangerous habits that perpetuate inequity. We all know what they are. The question is, do we think it's time to take those on? And Bernie Sanders is relentless about that. People recognize that, but they're not afraid of how they connect to that. They're afraid of how other people will react.
You know, one of the big questions, I think, for Democrats as a whole is whether or not Biden's voters go to Sanders if he's the nominee, Sanders voters go to Biden if he's the nominee. If Sanders ends up winning this thing, even though an overwhelming percentage of black voters have voted for Biden, do they switch their allegiance, or do they say, this guy's too radical for us, we're staying home?
I don't think black voters will say that. I don't think that most of the folks that are in our party are going to say that. I think that they will go with the nominee of the party. But again, optimism is great, but realism is reality. And the reality of it is that many Americans, black or white, that are Democrats want to win the White House back. And that will have to be, in our estimate, be done.
You know, it's interesting. You haven't spoken much about the agenda of Biden. It's more that he is reality-based. He's pragmatic. Is it what he stands for, or that you are convinced that he has a better chance of being elected president than her guy does?
It's a combination of two things. It's a combination of the fact that he has a better chance of being elected, and that if you speak to many African-American voters, they'll tell you what's wrong with having an Obama third term. So with respect to experience and being pragmatic in terms of policies, they see a third term, an Obama third term.
When you hear that, he is not Barack Obama. When you hear that, what's your reaction?
Well, the bishop and I are both people of faith. And people of faith, which a lot of the black voters are people of faith, not all. Right. And people of faith understand something. They understand that reality isn't just something that happens to us, it's something that we shape. And that's why I'm with Bernie. And that's why I know that if Bernie wins the nomination, while people on the other side will be disappointed, just like if Biden won the nomination, we will rally our voters behind, not only because they're into realism, but that idealism that has driven every major advantage that we've been able to win that's been hard fought. We still have that in our hearts, and we're not going to let that be drowned out by a Trump administration.
Can we talk for a minute, speaking of voters of color, about a mirror image of what we discussed with African-American voters, Latino voters? Here's a Morning Consult poll on March 4th, likely what they describe as Hispanic voters in the National Democratic primary, a crushing majority, almost exactly the same as Biden's over Sanders, is Sanders over Biden, 52 to 24, despite the fact he's a 78-year-old senator from one of the whitest states in America. How do you explain that?
Well, as an honorary Latina, being married to one, and I say having a Mexican mother-in-law is what really gets me in for almost 25 years now. I have to say, Latinos are not monolithic. Now, people say that, but then we still talk about Latinos as if they are. The same as black folk. And so young black people cut strongly for Sanders for a variety of reasons. When we look at the Latin population, if you look at how it's split in California, how it's split in Texas, there are conservative and moderate Latinos, and they went strongly for Biden. The thing is that a lot of Latinos are activists. A lot of Latinos are very strongly focused on justice, are strongly focused on transformation. And the people for whom those are their highest values, they go strongly for Bernie.
You know, can we, you want to say something?
No, I think that to her point, I think that a lot of those voters, as well as to the stats that you're also speaking of, is that a lot of the actually Latinx voters are, in fact, younger than the age of 41. And I think that whether it's African Americans or our Latinx voters, that they are really looking at a Bernie Sanders.
Can we return to black voters for the last minute or two here, if we can? It's been, I think, 30 plus years since the Democrat has won the White House without a significant majority of black voters. But I have to say, I can't tell you how many African American voters call our radio show and say, who are voting Democratic, who say they come visit us every 4 years to tell us what they're going to do for them, but they don't deliver. They just come back 4 years later saying they're going to deliver yet again. Do Democratic nominees and presidents deliver for the African American community in this country, whoever they happen to be?
I think that they have, depending upon which programs you're looking at. But again, when I hear that, I guess my concern is that Vice President Biden understands, by being in the Obama administration, what our expectations are. I mean, we're also at fault at that. We do allow white Democrats, and I'm going to say that, to come into our pulpits on Sunday. They asked us on Monday to be at the polls on Tuesday after the election. After they win, they kind of disappear. But we haven't done a great job of holding them accountable. So I'm going to pause on that.
Do Democratic politicians deliver what they promise, or even try to deliver what they promise to communities of color?
The Democratic Party has delivered to communities of color mass incarceration. It's delivered mass deportation. We blame that on Trump for accelerating policies that already existed. It's delivered a welfare reform in the 90s, if I could put that in bunny ear quotes, that has entrapped people in poverty and separated families.
So why are they so loyal to the Democratic Party if all the things you say are true, Representative?
Because the option feels like it's a party that's deeply, that has racism deeply rooted in it, even though not everyone in the party is racist, and that But the problem is that root is actually in American institutions, and sometimes it has a benevolent face. That's why Bernie Sanders is such an important candidate for us right now, because he says we don't have time, and even Reverend Jackson said it earlier today, our suffering hasn't been moderate, and so our response can't be moderate.
We got to go. Representative, thank you. Bishop, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate both of your time.